10 Hollywood legends who were trained killers in real life. They were icons of charm, charisma, and cinematic glory. But behind the silver screen smiles, many of Hollywood's most beloved legends carried secrets forged in the chaos of real combat. These weren't actors merely playing soldiers. They were men who had stared death in the face, who had fought, killed, and survived, only to return to an industry that demanded they look glamorous while hiding the ghosts that followed them. This isn't the Hollywood fantasy you've been sold. This is the hidden truth behind 10 legendary actors who lived as real-life warriors, killers trained by the military, molded by battle, and scarred by war. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. 10. Lee Marvin, the Reluctant Warrior. Before Lee Marvin became the gravel-voiced tough guy who commanded the screen in The Dirty Dozen and Point Blank, he was a real-life Marine who stormed the beaches of Saipan during World War II. At just 18 years old, Marvin found himself in the blood-soaked chaos of the Pacific. He wasn't acting when he crawled through sand under machine gun fire. He was living it. He was shot in the backside by a Japanese sniper, his sciatic nerve shattered, and nearly died before medics dragged him to safety. The experience didn't make him boastful, it made him haunted. Marvin often downplayed his heroism, saying only that he was a lucky Marine. But that steely, emotionless stare that made him so believable on screen, it came from real trauma, real violence, and real survival. When audiences later called him the ultimate Hollywood tough guy, they didn't realize they were watching the genuine article. 9. Charles Bronson, the Silent Avenger. Charles Bronson's screen persona, the quiet man who lets his gun do the talking, wasn't just cinematic myth. It was an echo of the young coal miner from Pennsylvania who traded a pickaxe for a machine gun. Born into poverty as the 11th of 15 children, Bronson grew up with calloused hands and a hunger for survival. During World War II, he joined the U.S. Army Air Forces and served as a B-29 tailgunner. His position, sitting alone at the back of a bomber, was one of the most dangerous jobs in the air. Bronson flew 25 missions over Japan. Imagine being 20,000 feet up, encased in metal, staring through the gun sight while enemy fighters swarmed toward you. He received a Purple Heart for wounds sustained during those missions, and the quiet intensity that marked his later career came directly from those long hours facing death. When you see Bronson's stoic expression in Death Wish, know this. That calm came from a man who'd already lived through hell. 8. Jimmy Stewart, the hero who hated the spotlight. Jimmy Stewart may be remembered as the gentle, stammering everyman of classic cinema, but in The Skies Over Nazi Germany, he was something else entirely, a leader, a killer, and a survivor. When the U.S. entered World War II, Stewart didn't just lend his name to the cause, he insisted on fighting. Despite his fame, he refused cushy propaganda assignments. He trained as a bomber pilot and flew more than 20 combat missions over Europe, facing anti-aircraft fire and enemy fighters that shredded planes and crews in seconds. By war's end, Stewart had been promoted to colonel and awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross twice. But the experience changed him. Friends said he returned home quieter, older, more burdened. His eyes carried a heaviness that no acting coach could teach. Watch him in It's a Wonderful Life, the scene where George Bailey breaks down, screaming in despair. That wasn't just acting. Stewart later admitted that moment came from something deep inside him, something from the war he could never quite leave behind. 7. Audie Murphy, the real-life killing machine. Before he became a movie star, Audie Murphy was a 5 feet 5 inches Texan farm boy who lied about his age to enlist. What followed was one of the most extraordinary combat records in U.S. history. Murphy killed more than 240 enemy soldiers, single-handedly held off an entire German company for an hour, and earned every combat medal available, including the Medal of Honor. When he returned home, he wasn't even old enough to vote. Hollywood came calling, turning him into a leading man. But Murphy's demons followed him. He suffered from severe PTSD before it even had a name, insomnia, flashbacks, violent outbursts. Yet, even while struggling with his mental health, he brought authenticity to every role. When you watch him into Hell and Back, the movie based on his own life, you're watching a man reliving the most painful moments of his existence, not acting but remembering. Murphy wasn't just the most decorated soldier of his time. He was the embodiment of what war does to the human soul. 6. Clark Gable, Hollywood's king in the crosshairs. When America's heartthrob joined the Army Air Forces, it stunned the public. Clark Gable, star of Gone with the Wind, was already in his 40s and could have stayed comfortably at home. But after his beloved wife, Carol Lombard, died in a plane crash while promoting war bonds, something inside him broke. Gable enlisted, determined to honor her by fighting. He trained as an aerial gunner and joined the 8th Air Force, flying missions over Nazi-occupied Europe. German intelligence even issued a standing order: capture Gable alive. They knew how valuable he'd be for propaganda. He survived harrowing missions, narrowly escaping death when enemy flak shredded his aircraft. When he returned, he rarely spoke about the war. Friends said he carried Lombard's memory like a wound that never healed. Behind the suave exterior of Hollywood's king was a man who had seen real loss and chosen to face death head-on in her memory. 5. Charles Durning, the soldier who crawled out of hell. Few actors endured what Charles Durning did. On D-Day, he was one of the first soldiers to storm Omaha Beach. Within minutes, the men beside him were dead. Durning was shot in the hip and barely survived. He kept fighting through Europe until he was captured during the Battle of the Bulge. The Germans executed most of his unit, but Durning escaped. He was later awarded the Silver Star and 3 Purple Hearts. Yet, like many veterans, he spoke little about it. Only late in life did he begin to share fragments of those memories, crawling through the sand, seeing friends die, being taken prisoner. That weight never left him. In Dog Day Afternoon and Tootsie, there's a fragility behind his warmth, the look of a man who has witnessed both the best and worst of humanity. 4. Henry Fonda, the Quiet Patriot. Henry Fonda didn't join the war to prove anything. He joined because he felt it was simply his duty. Leaving behind a thriving Hollywood career, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy at 37, serving as a quartermaster on a destroyer in the Pacific. Fonda saw heavy combat, including the Battle of Midway. He rarely spoke of it, preferring to let his performances do the talking. That moral conviction carried into his roles. When he played upright men, Abraham Lincoln, Juror Number 8, or the quiet patriarchs of American cinema, that authenticity wasn't an act. Fonda believed in decency, responsibility, and sacrifice because he'd lived them. 3. Kirk Douglas, the fighter who never stopped fighting. Kirk Douglas was born Isser Danilovich, the son of impoverished Jewish immigrants. Though he didn't see frontline combat, due to injury, he trained in the U.S. Navy as a communications officer during World War II, serving aboard anti-submarine patrols. While his combat exposure was limited, Douglas carried the discipline, toughness, and survivor's mentality of his wartime service into every role. Off-screen, he fought Hollywood's blacklist and pushed for justice for writers and actors whose careers were destroyed by fear. Douglas's real fight wasn't against enemy soldiers, it was against hypocrisy and tyranny at home. In every sense, he was still the warrior he had trained to be. 2. James Arness, the giant who walked through fire. Before becoming the towering Marshal Matt Dillon on Gunsmoke, James Arness was a real-life soldier who quite literally walked through fire. Standing 6'7", Arness served as an infantryman in World War II and was among the troops landing on Anzio Beach in Italy. Moments after stepping off the landing craft, he was hit by German machine gun fire, taking multiple bullets in his leg. He was evacuated and spent over a year recovering from the wounds that would leave him with a lifelong limp. The stoic strength he showed on screen was no act. It was the resilience of a man who had faced death and decided to keep walking. 1. Ernest Borgnine, the Eternal Sailor. Before his Oscar-winning Turn and Marty, Ernest Borgnine spent 10 years in the U.S. Navy, serving during both World War II and the Korean War. Borgnine enlisted right after high school and served aboard a destroyer escorting convoys across the Atlantic. Life at sea was grueling. Constant threat of submarines, sleepless nights, freezing winds. But Borgnine loved the camaraderie, the discipline, the sense of purpose. When the war ended, he didn't know what to do with himself. He said, "I was looking for adventure, and the Navy gave me more than I could have dreamed of." That same restless energy later fueled his acting career, where he played everything from brutal villains to gentle heroes. The hidden toll of heroism. Each of these men came home as heroes. But Hollywood didn't want the real story. Studios preferred polished press releases to painful truths. They scrubbed away the trauma, the nightmares, the memories of friends lost in the mud and blood. Yet, audiences sensed something different about these actors. There was a weight in their eyes, a truth in their gestures, a stillness that no acting school could teach. Their performances were raw because they came from lived experience, from death, duty, and survival. Behind every smile on a 1940s movie poster, there might have been a scar. Behind every perfect line delivery, a memory of gunfire. These weren't just actors. They were men who had walked through hell and somehow found a way to entertain the world afterward. So, the next time you watch one of their films, when Jimmy Stewart looks skyward or Lee Marvin lights a cigarette in silence, remember, they weren't just pretending to be heroes. They were heroes.